This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
At 1-800-Flowers.com, we know that connections are at the heart of being human. Whether celebrating life's joys or comforting during tough times, 1-800-Flowers helps you express what words can't. For nearly 50 years, millions have trusted 1-800-Flowers to deliver thoughtful gifts that help create lasting bonds. Because it's more than just a gift. It's your way of showing you care. Visit 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast and connect today. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
I'm Laurah Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. Today, strangers, we bring you to the Great Plains region of Texas, and more specifically to the city of Lubbock. There's a lot to say about the history of Lubbock, including a fun subplot in which a municipal merger ended with a hotel being transported across a canyon in the 1890s. We encourage you to look into that one on your own time. But for the purposes today, you need to know that there has long been a healthy population of academics in Lubbock. Texas Tech was founded there in 1923. And the beauty of having a lot of professors crammed into one city is that, should something, strange happen, the odds are good that someone with a PhD saw it and has something to say to the papers. Such was the case on August 25th, 1951, a hot Saturday that gave way to a warm Saturday night in Lubbock. It seems that a good chunk of the city's population was spending that evening outside, including 3 professors who were relaxing in the backyard of one of their homes. We can only assume that the conversation was riveting. Per the Associated Press, Professor Ducker was a petroleum engineering expert, Professor Oberg an instructor in chemical engineering, and Professor Robinson a geologist. There's an all walked into a bar joke here, we know, but a better punchline for this situation is what actually happened. All of these experts in how things work here on Earth, shooting the breeze in the backyard, and then some unidentified objects decide to appear in the sky. Pretty classic. According to the AP, quote, the first group of objects, flying in a rough semicircular or crescent formation, but with a bulge in the direction of flight, was sighted at 9:10 p.m. The objects moved from northeast to southwest. So did a similar formation which appeared about 3 minutes after the first one. The formation crossed the sky from arc to arc of the horizon in about 3 seconds. Objects in the formation were indistinct, but gave off a glow. If those objects weren't connected, they certainly appeared to be. The professors told the AP that the groups moved, quote, as a string of beads, and at an incredible speed. That string of beads likeness is both apt and a little confusing, at least to us. As far as we can gather, it just means that the group of lights moved as one unit. Odd and far away though that sight was, the professors were still able to make some educated guesses about how high these glowing objects were flying, and those estimates led to some alarming conclusions. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, quote, they calculated that if the objects were a mile high, their speed was about 1,800 miles an hour, and they should have been above 1,000 feet in diameter. If they were 50,000 feet high, then they were moving at nearer to 18,000 miles per hour, and they were about 10 times as big. We won't bore you with the particulars about how the professors might have reached those numbers, strangers, in large part because we don't super understand. It seems like trigonometry might have been involved. Big yikes from us there. In any case, the professors seemed confident in their conclusions, certainly enough to go to the papers, and they were quick to debunk any assertions that they might have been, in, shall we say, altered states of consciousness on the night of the 25th. As Professor Ducker told the Star-Telegram, the professors would often gather on the weekends, but never to drink anything stronger than iced tea. And Professor Ducker added, we didn't even have that Saturday night. And adding credibility to their insistence that they weren't even high on iced tea, the professors weren't the only ones who saw strange arrangements of flying lights that night. Various sources suggest that they were seen by scores of people. The Star-Telegram noted that a journalism professor at Texas Tech reportedly saw, quote, the same sort of phenomenon. And, as the History Channel recounted, quote, according to a retired rancher from Lubbock, his wife had seen something terrifying in the night sky. Just after dark, his wife had gone outdoors to take some sheets off the clothesline. Suddenly, his wife had rushed into the house, as white as the sheet she was carrying. The reason his wife was so upset was that she had seen a large object glide swiftly and silently over the house. She said it looked like an airplane without a body. On the back edge of the wing were glowing bluish lights. Now, strangers, while this might sound very different from what the professors saw, think about the notion of airplane wings without the body of the plane, and lined with lights so that the only thing you can really see against the dark night sky is a formation of lights in a vague semicircle. Doesn't sound so off base if you think about that. The Associated Press was also quick to report that the Lubbock Airport Tower and nearby Air Force Base confirmed that there were no aircraft over Lubbock at the time of these sightings. So, these lights were objects, they were flying, and they were unidentified. And about a week later, as the calendar switched to September, it happened again. And this time, someone in Lubbock had a camera handy. That someone was 18-year-old Carl Hart. Carl told the Odessa American that at 11:30 p.m. on August 31st, he was in bed watching the stars. No TikTok yet, obviously, though we'd like to think that he would have been scrolling it if he could. But it's a good thing for us that he wasn't eyeballs deep in traumatic candy salad content, because right around 11:30, a group of glowing objects passed through the sky. Or, really, they zoomed through the sky, coming from the north and disappearing to the south. The formation crossed the whole sky in 3 or 4 seconds. As Carl told the American, they were faster than any jets I ever saw. There was no time to waste for a teenage photographer. According to the Odessa American, Carl, quote, leaped out of bed, forgot the crutches he'd been using because of an injured leg, and grabbed his camera. First off, Carl, we're sorry to hear about your leg, and we're sorry we're 70 years late and hope that it healed up okay. But not even a bad leg could stop Carl. He got his camera gear set up and managed to take photographs of the objects when, over the course of the next minute and a half, they passed by a second and a third time.
This week, on a very special episode of Health Discovered, we're taking a closer look at a condition that affects hundreds of thousands of men each year, prostate cancer.
I first found out about my cancer on my birthday at the age of 45. Found out my cancer had spread to my pelvic bone. And from there, life just changed.
About 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer during their lifetime, and the risk increases with age.
Anything with cancer, you just think death sentence. And the only thing I could think about was, who's going to take care of my family? You have to go out there and build your support system. You got to build your team.
In this episode, we'll explore the science behind detection, along with the practical steps men can take to protect their health. Listen to Health Discovered on America's #1 podcast network, iHeart. Open your free iHeart app, search Health Discovered, and start listening.
After going through Whatever processing film entailed in the 1950s, Carl's photographs were developed the following day. And they were pretty good. Per the American, quote, after his photographs were developed, about 18 lights or objects could be seen in the first picture, and about 21 were in the second. The objects in the first group were V-shaped, and the second group appeared to be round and shiny dots. According to the Odessa American, a smattering of sightings came in the days after Carl got his photographs. Another Lubbock resident, Bill Winston, described seeing something very similar while attending a drive-in movie in nearby Odessa. And someone named J.W. Horton was reportedly with his wife in the backyard when both of them spotted what looked like, quote, a lighted flock of geese flying around 2,000 feet up and, quote, going at terrific speed. So, turbo geese? We can only hope, strangers, that someday the answer is turbo geese. Alas, that does not seem to be anyone's go-to. Turbo geese or not, though, it seems that nobody could come up with an actual explanation for these lights. Aliens were seldom discussed in the papers as a possibility, and it does seem that this series of sightings in early September of 1951 were the last, as far as our archives were concerned. But it was certainly not the last time that any media outlets discussed the lights. Apparently, a little less than a year later, in the summer of 1952, Look magazine ran an article written by Dr. Donald Menzel, a researcher at Harvard. In said article, Dr. Menzel claimed that he had solved the mystery of the Lubbock Lights. While we can't seem to find that Look article, we did manage to track down a response to it from around the same time. The Lubbock Morning Avalanche wrote, Dr. Menzel said the so-called flying saucers were the reflection of streetlights, mirages caused by an atmospheric condition known as temperature inversion. In his article, Dr. Menzel said that distant city lights will appear to float in the sky. Moreover, if the intervening air contains waves or is turbulent to any degree, the lights will appear to move, riding in on the crest of a wave, like ripples of moonlight on the ocean. Which is all very poetic, beautiful, and, yes, logical. Temperature inversion is a common explanation for UFO sightings, and one you may have heard us mention before. But the Lubbock Morning Avalanche had spoken to a Dr. E.F. George, the director of the Texas Tech Seismological Observatory, and a witness to the Lubbock Lights. He told the Avalanche that he did not believe that streetlights were a decent explanation. And, for what it's worth, Look magazine did apparently print both a photo taken by Carl Hart and one that Dr. Menzel recreated in his laboratory. And they were notably different. Per the Avalanche, quote, the lights were in similar formations, although those taken in the laboratory were more diffused than were those taken by Hart. The article was also the first time that anyone mentioned the Air Force getting involved. And of course they did, because it was the 1950s. But it seems that in 1952, all the Avalanche knew was that the military had gotten involved. Their verdict was still unclear. Quote, the U.S. Air Force sent in special investigators to the city to glean all possible information from those who reported seeing the lights. As far as we can tell, it took another 10 years or so before the Air Force dropped their official explanation for the lights. Why it took so long? That's unclear, but unsurprising if you know anything about the military's efforts on unidentified phenomenon. They do tend to sit on the good stuff for a while. Per the Lubbock Avalanche-Journal, quote, the Air Force conclusion is that birds, with streetlights reflecting from them, were the probable cause of the sighting. In all instances, the witnesses were located in an area where their eyes were dark adapted, therefore making the objects appear brighter. The kind of birds responsible for this sighting is not known, but it is highly probable that they were ducks. Highly probable ducks is, unfortunately, not very exciting, though it is potentially a good name for a band. It does seem that the people who initially reported seeing the lights were willing to fall in line behind the Air Force's bird theory, at least for the sake of no longer being asked what they thought. Those 3 professors whose accounts and calculations started this whole thing, all of them declined to comment to the Avalanche-Journal in varying degrees of, "I thought that we were done talking about this." Carl Hart, who took those photographs as a teenager, was now a grown man living in California. He acknowledged to the Avalanche-Journal that lots of people thought lots of things about the sighting, and that he was still of an open mind, but added as someone who endured a lot of crank mail in the intervening years, "If I'd been real smart, I would have kept the whole thing to myself." We don't really blame Carl for not being wild about how the whole situation went down. As he told the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, he stopped dabbling in photography once he started selling his photos of the lights to magazines. The fun was gone. What's more, he dealt with questioning from the Air Force and the FBI over the course of the years-long investigation. Plus, as he told the Telegram, "I got letters from all over the country, from cranks mostly. It took over a year to quiet down." As the Telegram put it, the whole affair was a hassle, but eventually just a blip on the radar of Carl Hart's adolescence. The Lubbock Lights were an interesting experience of his teens, like his first kiss, but that's about all. We hope, strangers, that your first kisses were not at all comparable to maybe seeing a UFO. Or, on second thought, maybe we do hope that. Send us an email if your first kiss was a little gray man, basically. Or perhaps don't do that. We do have delicate constitutions. In any event, it does seem that the main characters in this story were ready to move on with their lives, and ready to decide, once and for all, that shiny birds were to blame for the strange lights that they'd seen. The Air Force hath spoken. Well, it sort of had. Except for one strange thing. A high-ranking official from the Air Force wrote a casebook on this sighting, and many others he had investigated. And his conclusion was not so unambiguously Team Bird. In fact, it was really, really weird. Edward J. Ruppelt was a captain in the Air Force, and also a lead investigator for Project Blue Book. In case you're new here, that was the military's official mid-century research project on all things UFO. Captain Ruppelt was in charge of investigating the Lubbock Lights, and eventually wrote about his findings in 1956 in a government casebook titled The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. He focused pretty much solely on the lights that those 3 professors reported seeing right at the start of the whole affair. Throughout the report, he actually complimented the professors repeatedly as being, quote, the most technically competent observers that one could ask for in a UFO sighting. It reads to us like Captain Ruppelt wanted to ensure that he was being fair. These were not the kinds of people to make things up or to fluff their calculations. So, what was Ruppelt's conclusion? I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds, reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professors saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomenon. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. With the most important phase of the Lubbock Lights solved, the sightings by the professors, the other phases become only good UFO reports. Now, strangers, that is notably cagey, even for a military report on UFOs. from which we expect a not unimpressive amount of cage. If in fact the government had positively identified the lights, why not at least say what they were? If it's a commonplace and easily explainable phenomenon, then why can't we talk about it? Why would the scientist need to be anonymous if in fact this explanation was so commonplace and normal? What's more, the Air Force couldn't find anything suggesting that Carl Hart's photographs were doctored. So, whatever the totally normal explanation is, those photographs are of whatever that is. And the Avalanche-Journal reported that nobody, not vigilante UFO debunking scientists, not the Air Force, had been able to convincingly replicate those photos. To make matters more complicated, we're pretty sure that the official Air Force explanation of birds, which we saw mentioned repeatedly in the papers, was either a misunderstanding on the paper's parts or from a completely different document that Captain Ruppelt's casebook, which is irritating to say the least. See, we can't actually find any separate report from what the captain wrote in his casebook. It's possible, we suppose, that someone put out a press release at some point, but the papers never referred to such a thing. So, if the captain pointedly said it wasn't birds, where did people get the idea that this was the Air Force's official conclusion? Could it be that the news just got confused and took the likeness to a flock of migratory birds as gospel? We don't know, but whatever happened here has certainly muddied the waters. It's those muddied waters that give a UFO story longevity, though. Of all the stories that Project Blue Book tracked down and investigated, we know the ones where there wasn't an answer. At least, not the ones that the military was willing to admit to. And we don't pretend to know what goes on over there, but we imagine that if the Lubbock Lights had really been turbo geese or really shiny ducks, we'd know. That information is squarely in the public interest. We would think. We hope you'll join us next time for another premium exclusive episode of One Strange Thing. Oh, and if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on your favorite app. It helps us find more listeners.